Russia can strike Sweden and Finland with nukes in retaliatory action, now that they are NATO members. NATO's newer members are now potential targets of nuclear revenge. The former Russian president has warned that Dmitry Medvedev, who has styled himself as one of Russia's most outspoken anti-Western hawks, appeared to be referring to Sweden and Finland, the last two countries to join the Western military alliance. If conflict were to arise, nuclear weapons would not be off the table, the TASS state news agency reported. The non-aligned status gave them, Finland and Sweden, certain international perks given their geopolitical position and many other factors, Medvedev said. And now they are part of a bloc hostile to us, which means they automatically became a target for our armed forces, including potential retaliatory strikes and even the nuclear component or preventive measures within the framework of a military doctrine. Sweden was granted full membership of NATO last March, while Finland joined in April 2023, extending the alliance's border with Russia by over 1,300 kilometers. Last week, Moscow also warned Britain against deploying a coalition of the willing in Ukraine, declaring it could lead to a nuclear World War III. Putin hawk Sergei Shoigu, secretary of the powerful Russian Security Council and ex-defense minister, said Russia rejected Western boots on the ground in the war-torn country. He similarly warned of the Kremlin's readiness to both use nuclear weapons and restart atomic weapon tests in the Arctic for the first time since the Cold War, claiming Europe is secretly preparing for war against Russia by 2030. Sensible politicians in Europe understand that the implementation of such a scenario, putting Western troops on the ground in Ukraine, could lead to a direct clash between NATO and Russia, and subsequently to World War III, he told state news agency TASS. It was more correct to call such British and EU forces a contingent interventionists or occupiers, said Shoigu, referring to Sir Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing. Where will these peacekeepers come from? They will be units of the same NATO countries against the presence of which Russia opposed, even before the war, which began largely because of this threat. The deployment of NATO military infrastructure in Ukraine on our historical territory. Russia began building new military infrastructure along its border with Finland earlier this month in another provocative dig at NATO. Finland's Deputy Chief of Defense, Lieutenant General Vesa Virtanen, said that the Kremlin is deliberately testing NATO's unity to see if it will trigger Article 5, the alliance's collective defense clause. The Army chief explained that they are reorganizing themselves from the brigades, and there would likely be around 4 to 5 divisions, an Army Corps, and a supporting unit. So there will be more troops there in the future than before the Ukraine war, he added, while reassuring that Finland has been ready to defend its allies for decades. In response to Finland's NATO membership, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the establishment of the Leningrad military district near the Finnish border, and the deployment of additional military units to the area. Despite these actions, Putin has dismissed concerns over a potential attack on NATO members as complete nonsense, asserting that Russia has no interest in engaging in conflict with the alliance. Finnish officials have also reported an increase in hybrid tactics employed by Russia, including the orchestrated movement of asylum seekers to the Finnish border, which Prime Minister Petteri Orpo described as a hybrid attack aimed at destabilizing Finland and the EU. Ukraine-Russia peace talks hit another impasse as Moscow rejected a 7-point plan to end the war set out by the United States. This would recognize Russia's control of Crimea and effectively freeze the front line in place. The plan presented by the Trump administration to European allies earlier this month is widely seen as a land-for-peace deal that would allow Vladimir Putin to keep Ukrainian territory seized by his forces while assuring that Ukraine would not join NATO. But Sergei Lavrov, Russia's veteran foreign minister, declared yesterday in a written interview with Brazilian outlet O Globo that the Kremlin would only accept a ceasefire if various strict terms are met. These include the removal of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and what he called Ukraine's neo-Nazi regime. International recognition of Russian sovereignty over the 4 annexed Ukrainian regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia, and a restriction on the size of Ukraine's army, among other measures. Medvedev's comments come days after Vladimir Putin's declaration of a 3-day ceasefire from May 8, 2010, which was ridiculed by Ukrainian officials and analysts as a trick and cynical. Dara Masikot, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace think tank, focusing on Russian defense, pointed out that Putin likely doesn't want the threat of Ukraine air attacks to disrupt Russia's Victory Day on May 9th, with the nation set to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's triumph in World War II. The Kremlin wants a ceasefire for those days because it can't suitably defend airspace from Ukrainian drones, and they want a smooth 80th anniversary Victory Day parade, she said. The criticism of Putin's Victory Day ceasefire comes as his forces pounded Ukraine with 100 drones overnight. A 12-year-old girl was killed in the central region of Dnipropetrovsk, while several were wounded there and in the capital Kyiv.